I can never decide if I'm taking too much for granted around here or not enough. You're listening to the Colin Flaherty Don't Make the Black Kids Angry podcast. You know, when we do podcasts here, or especially when we do videos, and even more so when I do my books, I never ask anybody to believe anything I say. Never. Because it's just too much of a... I'm going to break my own rule here. It's too much of a mind fuck. I'm sitting here saying that most of everything you think you know about black and white people in America is totally off base. I'm sitting here documenting how black people are not the victims, they are the predators. And white people are not the predators, they are largely the victim of anytime there's any kind of interracial violence. I understand that a lot of people, that's not what they have internalized, but I also understand this, that our views towards race in this country are so secretive, and as we know, we are only as sick as our secrets. Our views towards race are so secretive, we don't really find a place where we can talk about them I'll use the term, in a safe space. And so people have these crazy ideas that just kind of fester and fester. They never get challenged. They never get exposed. They never get tested by other people going, yeah, that's right. No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. No, that's wrong. I mean, people just think these things. And we don't know they think them until they kind of burst from them, fully formed, and you look at it and go, yeah, that's pretty nutty. That's what I was thinking of the other day when I got this letter from one of our more faithful listeners and one of our brighter viewers. Let's just call him Bruce. Let me read the letter because it's not just what Bruce is talking about. It really kind of talks to a larger issue about how all of us should talk about this enormous level of black criminality, how it's so wildly out of proportion, and how so many reporters are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. So let's get to the letter. Dear Colin, I've introduced your videos into our largely libertarian, atheist, and agnostics group, and predictably, several influential group leaders have simply condemned you as a racist and a fraud. They are wildly offended by your blackface speech and use of Ray Nagin's chocolate city euphemism. One member assured me there was no evidence you ever reported or wrote for any mainstream media outlets, and you should be rejected because of that and because you allowed Alex Jones, who is truly a nutjob, to blurb your work. If you have a detailed CV or resume or actual links to articles you have been credited as writing in large publications, I could blow their fraud accusations right out of the water. I suppose the only way I can convince them you're not a racist is by getting them to watch more videos. I could also ask them if they think Elmore Leonard, who often wrote brilliantly and spot-on ebonics, was racist, which he clearly was not. Best regards, Bruce. Man, where do we start with this, Bruce? First of all, Bruce, I feel for you, my man. I happen to know a lot of libertarians. Small L, big L. I'm a small L libertarian, but I know some of the big L libertarians, people that go to these groups. I might even count among them the great New Jersey talk show host Willie Shields. Anyway, if you ever been to a libertarian meeting of any kind, or you meet up and talk with libertarians, large capital L, you'll notice that no matter how much they agree on something, somebody's always going to find something that really, really small. They're going to blow it up and they're going to totally disagree with it, and they're never going to talk to that person again in the history of the world who disagreed with them. I mean, it's usually something like, well, Colin, you didn't acknowledge the importance of the 1704 Sino-Soviet treaty ending the Spanish-American War. No, Colin, you didn't do that. I am never going to talk to you again. Ever, Colin. That's how libertarians roll, okay? That's a fact. And so when I see these, libertarians and atheists or agnostics, holding me up to be judged on my credentials, I just wonder, isn't that what people do to libertarians? I mean, isn't Isn't it weird that, the Libertarians are demanding that I have, first of all, they're demanding that I have these mainstream media credentials, which I do. We'll talk about that in a minute. But isn't it weird that the same people they're asking to submit my life to judgment as being valid or not, worthwhile or not, they'll condemn the Libertarians every minute of every day of the week as stupid, naive, unpractical. And they call the Libertarians the same names they call me. Maybe that's why Rand Paul and a couple of other Libertarians like to go running around the country reminding everybody there's too many black people in prison for no reason whatsoever. So we ought to just let them all out, because the enormous amount of disparity between black crime and white crime shows one thing only, white racism, because everybody knows white people and black people commit the same amount of crime, but cops pick on black people and they let white people get away with it. Rand Paul says this kind of stuff. We did videos of it in 2016 when he was running for president. Did lots of videos on it going, hey man, if there are black people in prison who are not guilty, you're a lawyer. No, matter of fact, he's an optometrist. But you know a lot of lawyers. Get them out. Get them out. I did it. It was hard, but it was just me. I mean, you've got the U.S. Senator says they should be coming out. You should be able to find a few lawyers. How about, are there any lawyers in this libertarian group? Maybe they could go around getting all these innocent black people out of prison. And so when I talk about taking too much for granted or not enough for granted, what I don't like doing here is what I don't appreciate in other people's videos. I mean, I like doing things that are happening now. I don't really feel the need, and I don't like it when other people do it, constantly are going back and reminding people of all the notches I have on my belt. And I'm a great person, I'm a great reporter, and you ought to be lucky to just be listening to me. Now, I really don't do that. I don't do the big time thing here. But, I mean, here's one story. I mean, when you hit one story, the dominoes start tripping, right? They go into the horizon. So this story got national attention on NPR, the LA Times. National attention. It was on Court TV for an hour. And they kept replaying it a couple times a day till my folks on the East Coast were getting sick of seeing good old Colin on TV every minute of every day. It was because of a story I wrote that got a guy out of prison. His name is Kelvin Wiley, Kelvinwiley. Kelvin Wiley, look him up. Put my name together with his, see what you see. You'll see my story, then you'll see the other stories in the LA Times, the San Diego Union-Tribune. You'll see columnists writing columns about the story saying, without Colin, that dude would still be in prison. So I did a story. I started out not from he was innocent. I started out from the viewpoint that he was guilty and he was making an idiot out of himself by trying to convince the world that a transparently guilty guy who was accused of trying to kill his girlfriend and convicted of assault, how this guy was wasting all of our time with this transparently stupid letter that he wrote to my editor, which I fished out of my editor's trash can. Yes, that's the kind of thing that I do when my editor's on the phone and I'm sitting next to him. So I fished this letter out and it said, this happened, that happened. I said, none of that's true. This is ridiculous. So he said, even the judge at sentencing said the main witness against me was lying. So the facts of the case were, this woman named Tony DiGiovanni, a white woman, accused her black boyfriend, Kelvin Wiley, of raging into her condo on a Sunday morning during a Charger game. It's a cul-de-sac. He raged in this big pickup truck, made a lot of noise, went to the door, boom, 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 went in, threw a toolbox at her, choked her, did all sorts of bad things to her. The jury found him guilty. It's amazing. And he kept saying, like, no, there's all this stuff that says I'm not guilty. There's the judge going, well, I don't believe the main witness here. Because the main witness at sentencing, she said, yeah, Kelvin threw me out of a car at 30 miles an hour. So I looked at all the reports. I called all the witnesses. I drew like a circle around the scene of the supposed crime. I talked to everybody. This is 2 years after the crime. I talked to everybody that lived within a few blocks of that scene. Even if I had to track them down in Idaho or Maine or Mexico, I tracked them all down. Nobody knew nothing. And I read the medical report, and the medical report in very stilted language talked about how she had belt marks or ligature marks on her neck. And they said in very stilted language, well, it doesn't appear that these remarks were administered by anyone, but they were self-administered marks. So this chick basically staged a crime, blamed it on Calvin Wiley, and the jury and the prosecutor, and they put him on a conveyor belt that took him right to prison. And I did the story, got him out, and he wrote me a letter at Christmas saying, hey, Colin, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gotten out. Said the same thing to the San Diego Union-Tribune. Said the same thing to the Los Angeles Times. Big enough for you? I've published tons of articles. I mean, they were writing about me, but I've published tons of articles in the Union-Tribune, LA Times, all over the damn place, under my name. That doesn't count like the 500 I've published under other people's names, my clients. New York Times, lots of other places. So I got this black dude out of prison. And I mention this once every couple of months just to remind some of the newcomers on the site, the newcomers to this podcast, that, we're dealing with this problem, this ridiculously dangerous problem of black criminality without racism, without rancor, without apologies. And I've got a few notches on my belt that allow me to talk about it without constantly apologizing to people for noticing. So that's what we don't do the apology thing here. We don't do the, I've got black friends here, black friends there, here, there, everywhere. No, we don't do that either. I don't ask you to believe anything. I just basically say, listen, it's all self-contained. Here's the video. Here's what one person says. Here's what another person said. That's how I got this dude, Calvin Wiley, out of prison. Oh, by the way, my kids, there was a Clint Eastwood movie. I forget the name of it. He got some dude off of death row, I think. Was John Malkovich the guy in that movie? I forget. Anyway, so Clint Eastwood basically got it. He figured the whole thing out in like 36 hours. My kids were going around, they were in grade school, going around saying, that's my dad in that movie. I thought that movie was going to turn into a TV movie. I had an agent, there were producers. But at the end of the day, they said, listen, this is a great story, except the villain in this movie is a woman, and TV movies are for a female audience. They might not buy it. So that was before a Fatal Attraction. But that was right about the same time as Fatal Attraction, now that I think about it. But this was a Fatal Attraction story. And that's a real thing. I mean, that's a real thing. Well, you know what? That's a different thing for another day. That happens a lot. And so anyway, so we got this high and mighty dude who's an atheist who likes, it doesn't matter if you're an atheist or a libertarian or an agnostic. Nobody is immune from this instinct of lifting your chin in the air and pronouncing to the world that you are morally superior to every other person in the world because every other white person in the world is a racist except for me. Lots of people love saying that, including this clown at this club of libertarians, atheists, and agnostics. All this stuff's easy to find. It's easy to find on Google. It's easy to find. I mean, I was on NPR talking about this. So easy to find. But here's the thing. Here's the sentence that I liked. One member assured me there was no evidence you ever reported or wrote for any mainstream media outlets, and you should be rejected because of that. So we run into this all the time. We run into people who ignore the evidence but then say the evidence doesn't exist. Listen, I understand this thing is not everybody's thing. It just isn't, okay? Some people aren't built to look this in the eye and say, hey, there's something really, really wrong going on in this country now. And there's way too many people in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. I get it. People have different lives. They don't want any part of this. Maybe they work in a cubicle. Maybe they're a cop. Maybe they're a soldier. And if they talked about this on the job, off the job, on their Facebook, on their Twitter, they would be fired. As many people have been fired for doing just that. But this guy takes it to a new level. He's just not like shrugging his shoulders and going, well, I haven't heard of this Colin Flaherty fellow before. Maybe we should check him out. No, he's taking it to the new level, which says, no, everything Colin says doesn't make any sense. And he hasn't proved anything, hasn't done anything. He doesn't know anything. He especially doesn't know the numbers. Yeah, we get that a lot. And we get that a lot from people who basically have yet to publish their first letter to the editor. So there's tons of evidence out there. And you mentioned Alex Jones. Listen, I've been on a ton of shows. I've done hundreds and hundreds of talk radio shows. I'm proud of my friendship with Alex Jones. Do I agree with everything he says? No. Does he agree with everything I say? Probably not. Do we have a different way of kind of existing on this planet? Yes. I don't do causes or solutions or big pictures. I just say, I leave those to smarter people presumably like the libertarians, atheists, and agnostics in that group, in that room. I leave that to them. And so I don't do the causes or solutions. I stay right in the middle at saying, hey, that happened. Because there are so many people that just say it's not happening. But if this guy at this group wants to disprove what I'm saying, if he wants to really shut down good old Colin, despite the fact that we got 100 million views on YouTube over the last 3 years, despite the fact 2 best-selling books, despite the fact we've got some of the greatest libertarian thinkers, Thomas Sowell, saying he didn't know how bad it was until he read my books. If this guy wants to shut me down, he could do it very easily. Here we talk about black hostility, black on white hostility, and how white person cannot walk into a black neighborhood without some serious risk of violence. All he has to do is hold the next meeting of their group at some barbecue joint down in the ghetto. Maybe started at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Yeah, started at like 6. And then run it up till 9. And then everybody walk back to their car. And make sure you take lots of, take your smartphones out so you can take lots of, pictures and videos of all the fellas greeting you so warmly. And you can ask them questions like, hey, this guy Colin Flaherty says black people aren't really into white people that much. That's why there's so much black on white violence. I don't believe any of that. Could you kind of like give him a message right now? So just do that. See what they say. See what happens to you. You won't do that because on some level, you have already organized your life around the truth of what we talk about here. You don't go into black neighborhoods. You don't go to black churches. You don't send your kids to black colleges. And so you just keep hoping if you ignore all this, it'll all go away. If you can ignore it, you can then say, hey, it doesn't really happen. It's not really happening. I loved the way they, jump on Alex Jones. But then let me ask you if you've ever heard Alex Jones do anything as wild and far-fetched as this. So the minute before they talked about Alex Jones, they of course were talking about the mainstream media, and Colin doesn't go in there. Yeah, well, I won 50 journalism awards in competition with all those guys from the mainstream media. San Diego Press Club, Society of Professional Journalists, SPJ, yeah, and up in Colorado Springs, working at a mainstream media outlets. 50 of them, at least 50. Yeah, you lose track after a while. I got so many. Including being named best reporter in San Diego 2 times for an article in San Diego Magazine and another article in the San Diego Business Journal. Look them up. But what about, I love the way you subscribe this. If you see, I've taught classes to journalists. University of California, San Diego, I taught a class on research and interviewing techniques for reporters. And I love so I know a lot of reporters. I party with reporters. I go to Vegas with reporters. Reporters call me and ask me how they should figure this out, write this story, write that story. I get an email twice a year from one of the big shots at Politico. A young lady who says, hey, Colin, every day I think about something you told me about reporting. I don't remember saying any of this stuff. I had other things in mind when I was talking to her all the time. But she says, I still influence the stuff she reports in Politico often. And so I know who these mainstream media people are. They're not, you see them on TV, you see them larger than life. You give them a lot more credibility than they deserve. To me, a person at a television station is nothing but a guy who went to Radio Shack and bought a transmitter. That's all they are. Or to quote my favorite line from, I think it was called Year of the Dragon with Mickey Rourke. Anybody out there see that? Mickey Rourke's has this hate-love relationship with this lovely Chinese reporter down in Chinatown. I think that was, I forget if it was San Francisco or New York now that I think about it. It must have been New York. Anyway, they're out to dinner one night and she's pontificating about what being a reporter is and how she has the right to know this and that and everything. And Mickey Rourke looks at her and says, "You're not a reporter. You're an actress." So let's flash forward to the New York Times. Did anybody else see this story about the former editor? I think she just retired like 2 years ago. Her name was Jill Abramson. And she was the editor, I think, for 5 years. When you're the editor of the New York Times, that puts you at the pinnacle of, you're of the most important job in journalism. You are the one setting the tone for the New York Times, which in turn sets the tone for hundreds of newsrooms and TV newsrooms and print newsrooms all across the country. Look at the New York Times. The way they report a story, 95% of the time, that's the way everybody else reports it. Okay, so Jill Abramson does a story. She was writing a column for The Guardian in London. That's, by all accounts, the self-admitted left-wing liberal daily newspaper in London, The Guardian. She writes a column about what a great person Barack Obama was, what a terrible, awful person Donald Trump was, things she was never really that quite forthright about when she was running the New York Times. Funny how many secrets these reporters have about what they report and what they really think. Fewer secrets because now a lot of them are just dropping the pretense and coming out and telling us. Anyway, so she does this column and she says she keeps a doll of Barack Obama in her purse. And she pulls it out once in a while to remind herself that at one time America had a progressive and African-American president. And the idea of holding this doll, carrying around this totem, this like mystical thing of good spirits, reminds her that this too shall pass and that good times will come again eventually. And this is the person that this clown from the group of libertarians, atheists, and agnostics, they're looking at her and going, "Colin, you haven't gotten the seal of approval from that nut job who used to run the New York Times, Colin. She has a doll of Barack Obama in her purse and carries it around, Colin. Do you carry a doll of Barack Obama around? Do you even have a purse, Colin? Until you do, well, Colin, you're just not going to be good enough for our club." And by the way, my CV, some of my little history, I put it on minds.com. It's right there. It's on the left side of the page. You can read it. You can read how my stuff was published in the Washington Post, how I won 2 times the Washington Post spy novelist, espionage, thriller contest 2 times. Hell, they only had 5 winners. I won it twice. David Ignatius, the big dog from Morning Joe, looked at my work and he said that was his strong favorite. That's not writing libertarian letters to the editor, fool. That's writing for a major newspaper dude. That's writing for a major thriller writer, David Ignatius. He's the one who said my stuff was a strong favorite. Not in using language, not too much different than Thomas Sowell or Alan West or Walter Williams or Breitbart or Daily Caller or Bill Cunningham, lots and lots of other people all over the country. And because I don't carry a doll around, I don't carry a purse around, that doesn't meet your high standards. I wrote a book once called Redwood to Deadwood. Here's my libertarian credentials, people. And that book was named one of the top 10 adventure travel books in the country. Well, really in the world, come to think of it, that year. I hitchhiked around the country for 4 months and just wrote about what I saw. And while I had such a tiny pack. I mean, it wasn't one of the, I wasn't carrying like, a 60-pound backpack. I was carrying, a pair of pants, a few shirts, and a computer. And, a few other odds and ends. I think it only weighed like 10 or 15 pounds. It seemed like it weighed 150 pounds. But one of the things I had in there that I started off, put in my bag first, was the 50th anniversary edition of Atlas Shrugged. I read a book. I read it like 5 times. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to read that now. And as I read it chapter by chapter, I had so little room, I just kept ripping out the pages and throwing them away. So I know who Ayn Rand is. I know who I'm very familiar with libertarians. I know what they're all about. And I'm surprised this fool got suckered into this mainstream media validation game that they don't give to anybody that disagrees with them. That's why so many people freaked. That's why so many reporters freaked out when I started doing my books. What's the guy's name in Chicago? I think his name is Raj. He's the Indian. He's from Canada of Indian descent. Indian as in India descent. He's the anchor at the ABC affiliate. In White Girl Bleed a Lot, I document the email exchange with him, how he freaked that somebody actual reporter would do work to say, man, there's a lot of stuff going on in Chicago that you are ignoring. There's a lot of stuff in Chicago you're in denial, deceit, and delusion about. You know, Ayn Rand, she had it right. She looked at racism. She said racism is the most insidious form of collectivism there is. This guy wouldn't know a racist thought, a racially hostile thought, if a pallet full of 5 million Ayn Rand books dropped on top of him. And so if you guys want to look into who I am, all the stuff I've written, go ahead. Does it matter? What matters is the work. The work matters. Does it matter that I was, CNN did a story on me? Does it matter that I've been on Sean Hannity's radio show a bunch of times? Does it matter they talk about my books on Sean Hannity's show? Does that matter? Does that matter that NPR, they not only talked about me when I've been, I used to be a guest. I used to be like the go-to guest on the local NPR affiliate in San Diego. Whenever they needed a token conservative to say something, they'd pull me into the studio and there we go. I'd do the hour interviews on the morning show, and then we'd do the weekend wrap up. You have a couple of reporters sitting around a table talking about their latest stories. Does it really matter that much? I mean, are you one of these guys that looks at a really crappy looking shirt and then you look at the label on it and said, oh, it's a Givenchy. That's a $300 t-shirt. You buy it and it falls apart, after the first washing, and you figure it out it's a fake label and you're just not that bright. Well, that's what you sound like. And so Thomas, so we talk about whether, who has to convince who that somebody's a racist or not a racist. We don't play that little game around here. Thomas Sowell defined racist as any conservative winning an argument with a liberal. Does this guy even know who Thomas Sowell is? Does he know who Ayn Rand is? Has he ever read anything by them? And why is our otherwise excellent follower Bruce, why is Bruce so worried about it? One of the things that Bruce said here is he talks about how this unnamed agnostic libertarian atheist, he said he's wildly offended at my blackface speech and use of the word chocolate city. And so I use them all the time. Yes, we are mocking black people. We are mocking people who believe they are entitled to special things because of their race. We are mocking people who believe they get a free ride not because of their individual ability, but because of their racial identity. Good Lord, Ayn Rand would be doing the exact same thing today. I mean, why do black people get a free pass in your book? Don't you mock, don't you scorn the big taxers, the big spenders, the people who are constantly creeping in on our liberty? But when we document this kind of collectivism, black collectivism, and followed by black hostility, followed by black criminality, all wildly out of proportion, when we document it not on the fringes, but on the mainstream media, on the some of the most popular news outlets in the country, thinking of MSNBC, CNN, NPR, places like that, and we document that, all of a sudden you put your nose up in the air and say, oh, I don't like that, because I think black people are special and Colin shouldn't be allowed to make fun of them even when they say stupid things. Yes, anybody who makes fun of black people when they say stupid things, they are, they're bad people. Is that the way it works? You want me to get my doll out? Me, my little Obama doll. This dude probably has an Obama doll. I don't even want to contemplate what he's doing with his Obama doll. And so really, I think one of the reasons I enjoyed getting this letter and reading about it is because isn't there a lesson in this for all of us when we talk about this? I mean, people are going to challenge us. They're going to make ad hominem attacks on us. They're going to say we're bad people for noticing this, noticing that. Why do we have to apologize for noticing? Why aren't the judges apologizing for looking at these black criminals and letting them out one again and again and again and again? That's not just some cliche from a 70s Dirty Harry movie. That's happening right now. It's called criminal justice reform. Yes, libertarians have been swindled into thinking that's a good thing. And so when you're out and about and if you feel like you're in a place where you want to talk about it, I mean, how can you defend yourself against the charges that you are racist? You're having a discussion about something going on really wildly out of proportion. 1 minute, the next minute, you're sitting there fumbling about ways to convince all these hostile people, all these ignorant people that you are not a racist. You lose. The minute you buy into that, you lose. Don't be a loser. Don't listen to these clowns that want to call us names as we point out some of the most ridiculously dangerous situations of denial, deceit, and delusion in this country, as we do it every day. We have to do it every day because that's how often the mountain of denial, deceit, and delusion grows and accumulates more and more and more. So thanks, Bruce, for sending me this letter. Maybe this podcast will be of some help to your buddies. I wish them all lots of luck in publishing their first letter to the editor of their 2000 circulation community newspaper about how they don't like traffic lights because they're infringing upon our freedom. That's juvenile. That's stupid. Nobody has time for that. We're playing a high-stakes game. We're playing a high-stakes game about reporters and how they're not reporting the news. But even higher than that, we're playing a high-stakes game with people's lives, where we're saving lives on this channel, on these podcasts. We're saving lives by letting people know what's really happening. Get tons and tons of those letters really thanking me for doing that. So, I mean, in the scheme of things, I mean, I hope Bruce's friend doesn't take me up seriously and head down to the closest black neighborhood to try to prove me wrong, because we may never hear from that fool again. And I don't think that would make even one black kid angry.